decided to interview you. So I'm really curious to know a lot about your show and how you came up with it. How did you first start the show?
Um, so David has been this character, Dr. Rapture, for
A long time.
yeah, at least since I've known him. And
5, 6 years, something like that.
yeah, and that character's gone through a lot of different metamorphoses. And the most recent one, I have a web production company called Dog2 Media, and David had called me and said, I really want to do a horror show. Would you be interested in one? And of course, I was very interested. Um, So he came up with this character. He started his own show called Dr. Rapture Spooky Madness, and that's been running for
About a year and a half now.
yeah. So last Halloween, I got given two projects that were Halloween oriented. One was a haunted studio, where it'll walk through haunted house kind of thing. That was going to have a live television element, and the other was at BATV. They wanted to start airing old movies, and they were just originally going to just air the movies like straight out, like you download the movie and we'll air it. And I said, well, would you like a show that's kind of around that? And they were very excited about it. So I was like, all right, well, I know somebody who's really into horror and I can work off that. So I created the character Joy off of Rapture, so there would be Joy and Rapture, so that we would
Matinee of Madness. Because it works.
yeah, and we just kind of started. Went from scratch. It was really just a lot of a labor of love over several weekends.
I mean, most of the show is completely unscripted. It's just we make it up right there on the spot.
Mm.
Quite literally before we turn the camera on.
Yes, I think there's a lot of footage, the raw footage that we had of us working it out, which is really fun. Like we come up with a joke, and then it became kind of a one up. So I come up with a joke, and David would be like, "What if we did this?" And vice versa. And then we'd be like, "Oh, what if we did this?" So even in between takes, we would do one take with the first joke and be like, "Oh, this would be funnier.
Yeah,
what if
we do improve it now?"
Yeah, and so from take to take of a joke, you'd have this metamorphosis. So it was a real fun process. It was mostly just us being locked in the theater with the camera and seeing what came of it.
What came of it was these two ridiculous characters playing off each other and often against each other in between local PCAs in place of commercials. While community access might not be seen as lucrative, it did give Cow and Corfel the ability to be delightfully experimental. Free from aggressive oversight and producer meddling, producer-director Cowell found a lot of freedom both in front and behind the camera. A self-described fan of horror, Cowell, when presented with the opportunity of the show, was all too eager to call on his friend and colleague who was steeped in the genre. Alright, so what would you say inspires you for the show?
The movie itself.
Itself, it does help that I'm naturally just inclined for Halloween and all that sort of stuff. I try to bring as much of that to him all at once.
Yeah, when I first started visiting David up in Maine, I used to joke that his house was where Halloween hung out the rest of the year, because his decor is definitively spooky Halloween horror.
Taxidermy, things in jars.
There's a lot of things there that I think are directly designed to unsettle people.
I like it.
I know you do. So there's that element, and especially when we were starting from a Halloween standpoint, with the vaudeville we were doing for the haunted studio, that was definitely a big part of it, because I could focus on just being vaudeville and funny, and David could focus on making sure that it was still creepy and spooky.
You gotta get the aesthetic right.
Yeah. So for the show, we did a lot of research going into other horror hosts, like classic horror hosts, Elvira.
I am such a huge fan of Elvira.
Yeah. Penny Dreadful is a more modern one.
Penny Dreadful, yeah.
What's the one we watched with the two puppets, Monster Melons?
The Monster Melons.
Yeah.
Wow, I can't remember that one.
Yeah, she was really good. Let's think with names. I'm gonna remember. But anyway,
We'll figure it out.
We watched a lot of we just watched a lot of old vintage horror hosting because once upon a time every access center and every city had their own horror host. Like that was a big thing for a while.
Yeah, late, like early, like the 80s were like the king of that. It's like late 70s, all through the 80s, and then like it kind of petered out during the early 90s.
Yeah, and I mean, we jokingly were just like, we're gonna bring it back. We're doing that. Like we're bringing horror show back. But I mean, really, it was coming from just wanting to have fun with it. Like we had no grandiose vision beyond.
And
here's
honestly,
some movies.
And honestly, we're not bringing anything back. There's still plenty. There's way better horror hosts out there. They're aggressive.
Yeah, well, they've all moved to the web. I think at least in this area. I mean, again, I haven't looked into it aggressively, but I think in this area we're probably the only ones on Access. Still, I mean, around the Boston area, I might be wrong.
Yeah, I would think so. I haven't seen much in the way of many horror hosts in this area at least, but it doesn't mean because there are so many access stations
That's
around
true. And
here.
I would say we did do a lot of research because we were just concerned with what we were doing.
Yeah.
Because I mean that was the thing. It was we were just going to be able to watch these movies and come up with jokes for them. I mean, it can't beat that.
Beauty part is if there are other horror hosts around, you're really not muscling in on any sort of territory because each one is different. They're always different. Sometimes they show the same movie. Sometimes they show movies that you might never have seen before, and that's the beauty part of it. You get a whole spectrum of spooky and sci-fi and all that fun 50s niche.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mean, it's more from our perspective. It's definitely more about our focus on the show rather than looking at what other people were doing too much. Like we like I said, we did some research, but very early on, I said like let's just make this what we want to make this and what our idea of this would be, and let's not watch too much of any one other group because then we might be influenced too much by it.
I mean, my show, Spooky Madness, it started out as a movie review show.
Oh yeah,
horror movies, and then I'm just like, I don't want to do that, and now it's more like Addams Family Monsters.
Yeah, that show is like it has a lot of really cool little skits and spooky back and forth.
It had changed a lot since the first episode.
Yeah, and I think with this too, it gave us a nice outlet to go into that end of it, and to because a part of it they were saying too was just like it's not overly fun to just sit here and review a movie by myself, like whereas with the format that Spooky Madness is now, he can be all these characters interacting, and then in this show we play off each other. And I mean that's been the meat of it.
It's hard to play off yourself sometimes.
So what would you say was the process of the character formation? I mean, did you try to balance each other out? What was that character development?
Well, for me, and like I said, David was Dr. Rapture for a long period of time. So he came to that with this whole character, backstory, baggage, what have you. I created mine completely from scratch. Just
was it like a weekend?
It was. I mean, it was basically just I knew we had these two projects. I knew I wanted us to do it together. Rather than try and make something new that we both had to start from scratch on, I would rather build on something that David does really well, and then just create a character that complements that character. But I mean, I think that there was a lot of growth in the characters.
Oh yeah.
Just through that process. I mean, suddenly they had backstory. They were.
Honestly, I find Rapture far more low key. Like he's a lot less out there during this show than he is on my show because I have you being out there.
Yeah, that's true. My character is like quintessentially over the top. Like he's. And it's really fun because it allows David to really play the straight man, and then,
which I normally never do. I normally never play the straight guy, and it's funny.
Yeah, and because I can do the ridiculous over the topness, and then the slapstick element we add to it is really fun. I love that my character is habitually the the one getting slapstick shot at. I mean, we both go back and forth a little bit. Like we had said that initially, that there was going to be no one of us is always the heel.
We need to make it even.
Yeah, we need to each have our own times in the spotlight for it to work. But beyond that, I mean, I just love that we can do all these ridiculous things to each other, and it's totally in character for us to be absolutely buddy in one scene, and the next scene to be trying to shoot the other one. Like it works with our characters, and it's been a lot of fun. And as far as like backstory, like I don't know if I've developed too much of Joy's backstory.
Mad scientist who went to Mad
Scientist University, and that was about it. And then it's fun too to have those two elements of mad scientist, because you say mad scientist and there's a look most people think of, and I think Joy I tried to make fit that look, and you have like so many other people with that same look, the crazy hair, the lab coat, so those kind of things are so quintessential. And originally we talked about David having a lab coat too, so we'd have a visual aesthetic.
I hated the lab coat idea.
He did.
I was like, no, I don't want a lab coat.
You did it for the live show.
I did it for that one live show.
And afterwards, he just like really had like this sour face out, and he's just like, I don't like it. I was like, all right, well, we don't have to do it. And in hindsight, it was one of the best decisions, because my character comes in with all this bright white aspect to him, and David's in almost all black with like some accents,
some reds,
and
black and reds.
Yeah. So. Yeah, so it's really fun, like looking back, like that little decision that was like nothing at the time, that was like wasn't any deeper thought than just like, you don't like lab coats? Well, don't wear a lab coat. That's fine. Turned into this beautiful aesthetic of us visually looking at each other, and I mean the opening where we always like slide together and
crash
frame
into each other.
That's when I started noticing. When I started editing that, I'm like, oh, we're really like hilariously opposites, and we're both supposed to be mad scientists, but it's very different. Like, I think yours is so spooky, culty, and like, spells and books you shouldn't read from.
Witchcraft.
Yeah.
Sacrifices.
Yeah, and mine is all like
normal weekend things.
Ridiculous contraptions and like, Frankenstein style stuff, and I very much see that Joy would probably leave the show and like go and try and fight a superhero, versus Rapture would go to like some cave and summon a demon.
Woo!
Zap. 1.21 gigawatts.
The aesthetic, though accidental, delightfully fell into place, and what started as a preference from Koffel clearly developed into one of the show's signature looks. The same can be said for the background. When asked why I set the show in a theatre, Cowell replied matter-of-factly, because it was there. Everything about the show seems so delightfully slapdash, and it might just be the cobbled-together feeling that makes it work.
So, where do you see the show going?
Fame, fortune, G5 planes.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Ecuador.
I very much see a jacuzzi full of champagne in both of our futures.
That could be fun.
Right? I mean, that's bubbles in bubbly.
It's true.
What's better? Realistically, I don't know if we had any major like.
We mostly did it just for fun.
Yeah, I mean, it really like. I mean, I say Labor 11. I really mean like we were really happy to do it. But I mean, we want to keep doing it. That's definitely.
On a side note, though, Dr. Rapture Spooky Madness. I want that other thing for Dr. Rapture Spooky Madness.
You egotistical son of a bitch.
I am an egotistical son of a bitch.
But yeah, I mean, it's fun to do. I want to I'd like us to keep doing it. I want it to grow, and I definitely want to do the live event element to it again. And we did it in kind of the reverse order the way I'd like it to the first time, which was the live event happened, and then the show started airing. And I very much for further seasons to start the show and lead to the finale of a live event.
It's funny, the live event that we did as Joy and Rapture was kind of like how we do the filming. We were doing rehearsals. I had never even done any of the rehearsals. until what 20 minutes before the show had
Yeah.
started.
I had sent you all the skits that I wrote, but I had said like in the top, I'm like, I understand this is just words until we rehearse it.
And then we did that, and wasn't too confident then, and then
No.
nailed it. I nailed it. I didn't mess up one line the whole night,
No.
except for this guy right here. He screwed up some lines.
Once I called you Joy.
And then I went with it.
Yeah, and we thankfully it's really funny. The skit was supposed to be about Joy creating this machine, which was a brain in a jar. So when your brain was too full, you could just put stuff in it. And we had this great joke with it. And thankfully, that was the setup where I said, Joy, and he just goes, and I'm like, and he did. He played off of it, but I was able to be like, oh, my head's so full. You know what? I have to fix that. So I saved it.
Yeah. I've never been very good with scripts, like memorizing scripts, but improv and like right on the spot stuff, I'm okay with. I'm pretty decent with, and I think I proved myself over the years.
Yeah, no, I mean, those bits were hard. I mean, it's
Especially in front of a live camera.
a live camera, live audience, and the live audience, the placement in that studio was very bad because we were basically in front of the haunted studio. So we had kids running and screaming between, literally running in front of our cameras sometimes to get to the haunted studio, and they were screaming in there, and they were like talking to people like in line. So basically, like, we were very distracted.
Yeah, it was. Sometimes those kids, they
They were fun though.
they did
but-
not understand live at the time.
Nope. Not that they really should, honestly.
Hey, some of them should have.
That's fair. But all in all, it worked out really well, and it I think that solidified the characters for me a lot, and got the groundwork laid for the show really well. We were already in pre-production for the show, but it was very much a toss of like, will it work? Will it be funny?
Will we work well together?
I mean, we worked together for a while, but this was a new kind of dynamic.
Yeah.
Because usually up until then, on Dogtune, I had my shows and David had his show, and we would do crossovers. So he'd come to the set for one of our shows, or we'd send a character to him. So you always had this dynamic of while you were working together and while you were developing something together,
There was a separation.
there was a definitive like, oh, I'm on your show, and this is how you do it on your show. And then he'd come to our show, and I'm like, this is how we do it on my show. And so this is the first time that it was like, this is how we're going to do it on our show.
It's really put a huge strain on our friendship, though, because we hate each other so much.
Yeah. We don't talk much outside of the show, actually. Separate trailers.
It's really hard actually sitting next to him.
Yeah.
I hate you so much.
It's clear these two co-creators have a lot of fun, both on and off the set. It's that clarity of enjoyment that permeates every moment of Matinee of Madness. And while a bulk of the show's 2-hour run is devoted to horror movies of yesteryear, it's those beautiful moments between these two mad scientists and their wacky characters that they bring in that keep us captivated.